the words wild horses, you guys probably think of not that, but this. You envision in your mind a herd of beautiful creatures just running free and wide open and wild. Or maybe you think of this little guy right here. Blast back to our childhood, good old Disney. But in reality, as sad as it is, they are looking more like this, which is, as you can see here, is a mare who's obviously very, very skinny while she's trying to feed her young. So in 1974, there were 42,000 wild horses. That's according to a BLM census. And in 2009, there were 37,000 wild horses, in the wild, of course, and 31,500 in the Bureau of Land Management's holding pens. So according to the BLM's appropriate management level, which is a calculation done by a computer, which takes into account all the forage that's in an environment and produces a number of how many animals it can sustain. So according to the BLM's AML, the western states only has enough forage to sustain 27,000 horses. So in 2016, that number jumped from the 37,000 in 2009 to 67,000 wild horses and 45,000 horses in the government pens. And in 2017, we saw another big jump, all the way up to 75,000 horses in the wild. So this caused concern towards ecologists, rangeland managers, and ranchers. Obviously, they're seeing this huge spike in horses, and they're wondering, okay, well, what's really going on here? What's going on with the environment? So they start to kind of look into it, and they notice that these horses are causing just irreversible damage to the desert and the riparian areas, which are very, very delicate ecosystems. And the wild horse advocates, of course, their argument against this is instead of getting rid of the wild horses, we need to cut down on the domestic cattle and sheep populations. So these two pictures are in the Sheldon National Wildlife Refuge in Nevada. And this was in 2012. They did a study where they put up enclosures which would keep wild horses out of some parts and then let them graze in the other. So on the left here you see the grass is really tall, it's lush and thick, and this is one of the excluded parts. So wild horses didn't have any access in this for a year. And then on the right, this is a part where wild horses could get to and they could graze. And you see that it's pretty tore up and there's not much grass left. So that's a big problem when it comes to either ranchers running their cattle on public property, on BLM property, or even for the native species which rely on this ground cover or this forage. So one of the arguments from ranchers is that even though there's really high populations of cattle and domestic sheep, they can be rotated around to different pastures through the grazing or the grazing rotations, which can actually benefit the forage if done right. And this right here is a BLM holding pen. So this is probably a short-term pen where they come and they're processed and they get their freeze brand, which marks them as a wild horse. And you can see they're pretty crowded. It's not the best sight, but this is just what the BLM has to go for. So before 1971, the people could do whatever they wanted with wild horses because they're public property running on public land. And in 1971, I believe it was Nixon, passed the Wild Horse and Burro Act, which turned wild horses into a protected species because they represented the American Western heritage and what we were fundamentally built on. And since the Wild Horse and Burro Act in 1971, population has increased to over 3 times the appropriate management level. And they estimate that this is due to the absence of hunting, which was a common way of getting rid of the wild horses, and the failure of BLM's adoption program. So the BLM's current system holds horses for about 5 years. And this is so long because they're trying to adopt them out through the system where they get people pretty much to come out to their pens and they say, okay, I want that horse they adopt them and try to break them and raise them for their own. But the only problem with that is that wild horses are wild animals, so they don't really want to be your friend. And the BLM's wild horse budget, it gets spent mostly on just feeding these horses, so they don't really have any extra money laying around to go out and get more or to build more pens. It costs about $50,000 per horse over its lifetime at a BLM pen to feed it, water it, and take care of it if it gets sick. So with that cost in mind, BLM spent last year $50 million on wild horses in long-term and short-term pens. So if you think that's $50 million that could be going to something way better than providing hay for a horse. And as well as monetarily, and more of an environmental impact, just the California and Nevada BLM pens alone, the average use of water is about 3,372,600,000 gallons of water. Now that's to water the horses along with grow all the hay to feed them. So as hopefully you can see, the BLM system is a little bit flawed, and we really need to think of a better way to go about this wild horse issue. So some people have talked about maybe taking these wild horses and relocating them to places that are very prone to wildfires and using them to cut down on the forage that's around there and cut down on the grass cover, so maybe the next time a wildfire comes through it won't be so devastating and it'll be easier to control. And other people have talked about using the wild horses and using their meat to feed people who don't have money to provide for themselves. So I really want you guys to think about it. Maybe when you're bored laying in bed tonight or something, what can we do for this? Maybe you can think of something and send it to BLM and you'll be the next big famous person.